All right, everyone. How was your lunch? Good? Why are you not looking happy? How can I help you, sir? Us? All right, team. Grab your seats, turn your face around to the front, Dr. Tony, and let's get into our final group of presenters. And they're a very interesting bunch. No doubt you'll find some really wonderful stories to become invested in, and maybe you want to become invested in their story long-term as a shareholder. The first one, many of you may be old enough to remember the famous Timothy Leary. Do you remember a guy called Timothy Leary, or heard of a fellow called Timothy Leary? Man, I'm just going to kill a little bit of time while people are coming in at the back there, but I want to tell you a story. In my apartment block when I was in my 20s, I met a fellow called Charles Slack, Professor Charles Slack, and he was an associate professor under the great Timothy Leary back in America in the day, and he was actually involved in all of the experiments that he was doing with the magic mushrooms and acid, etc. And I remember him telling me at the time, and this is nearly 30 years ago that I remember this happening, and he was saying, oh, Chrissy, the things that it did, the way it helped people, the way it opened people's minds up, you know, people who were sad and miserable and depressed, all of a sudden they were happy, but not just temporarily. It changed their outlook on life permanently, and he was really distressed that this had been taken away from the people. So our first presentation today is quite interesting, I think, when I consider that conversation that I had with Professor Slack back in the 90s, it wouldn't have been. So Tryptamine Therapeutics is our first presentation up here on stage. They're actually the newest company, newly minted come on up here, come on. This is Jason Carroll, everyone. Make him welcome as he comes up. So, mate, he looks a bit nervous in front of you all, but this is the first time he's been presenting at a big conference like this for us at TechKnow. So you're only listed in May, weren't you? So May. And they've got a couple of drugs which have been listed as illegal for the last 66 odd years. We're looking at psilocybin and psilocin, correct? And I suppose the thing that I want to put in front of all of you is, what are your preconceived notions when you hear about those drugs? What do you think immediately? Pardon? Hippies, yeah, hippies. Not a clinical sort of situation. We're talking very clinical here and very targeted as well. So I'll be interested to hear at drinks this afternoon, because we are having conference drinks, what your thought process is then, and if it is something you'd like to perhaps avail yourself of or become invested in some way. So complex mental health issues that currently don't have any treatment, what do we do with them? And is what Tryptamine is about to offer up and what you're about to hear about, is that a solution? Would you please make this gentleman very welcome, everyone?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name actually is Jason, so there you go. I'm really excited to discuss Tryptamine Therapeutics with you, as well as a very descriptive word which has been mentioned now, which is psychedelics. People have very preconceived notions about psychedelics. I've had 34 years experience in an industry that often people like to term evil big pharma. That would be me. I'm not a psychedelic advocate, never was, probably never will be, but I do believe in data. I'm not going to ask any of you to turn to those next to you, give them a big hug and tell them how they're good and kind. But being from big evil pharma, or evil big pharma, EBP, medical terminology there, I might say for you to look at the person next to you on the left and the right, and then say within 20 years, one of the three of you will probably die. And if you want to be one of those that lives a long and happy life, we have the product just for you. That's the evil big pharma way. So have a listen. Keep an open mind if you can. Don't think about psychedelics in the truest sense that you may remember them. 66 years ago, 1958, psilocybin was first synthesized in a lab. A lot has happened in 66 years, but not a product to be approved anywhere. So that's what we're about. So looking at our overview, and by the way, I've got these presentations outside if anyone wants them to take one and see some of the data that I won't get through today because I have a certain time limit. A couple of names on the shareholder agenda here I'd like to mention. For anyone that knows Johnson & Johnson, you'd know Janssen Pharmaceutica is the pharmaceutical company of Johnson & Johnson. I had the pleasure of working for Herwig Janssen, who's the son of the founder of Janssen. So He's got $1 million in the organisation at IPO, 4.5% share in his family. So Herwig and his sister Yasmin, both children of Dr. Paul Janssen, have both put money into tryptamine. You'll see our scientific advisory board, and I may have mentioned for those that have heard me speak before about Professor Robin Carhart-Harris, who's arguably known as the most important person in psychedelic medicine for the last 30 years. He's done so much of the clinical work around the entropic brain and how it works and why psychedelics are actually very effective. You see two other people here as well, and these have just been announced the last couple of days, which is very, very exciting for us. So Professor David Castle, he's from out of Tasmania. He spent a lot of time in Toronto setting up a unit and 20 years as a professor at Melbourne University. We also have Professor Philippa Hay, who's Australia's foremost expert in eating disorders, with the focus around anorexia nervosa in particular, but all eating disorders. And she hypothesises that eating disorders are on a spectrum. So if you theoretically work in one of those areas of that eating disorder spectrum, you'll work in all. She is not a psychedelic advocate. In fact, she's one that would say is against psychedelics. Yet she's going to join our scientific advisory board because she's worked in this field for over 30 years and yet has not been able to find anything that can actually cure patients who have anorexia nervosa or treat them in the right way. In fact, almost all eating disorders are not effectively treated. Psychotherapy, minimal results, antidepressants, minimal results, and potentially negative results. There are so many opportunities within the areas that tryptamine is covering that you'll be able to see there are places where there are opportunities to invest. This is some of Robin's work. He did a lot of extensive work on psilocybin. He has more than 220 clinical papers or research groups that have been working on psilocybin for the last 15 or 20 years. He's the first to initiate a trial in psilocybin versus an antidepressant, in this case escitalopram, and he's the first to think about the one of 7 potential areas where the system of the brain actually works and can be understood, and his is the entropic brain, which is the number 1 of the 7 that always is discussed and the one that is most likely. No question that interest across the world is continuing to accelerate in the field of psychedelics. They are very exciting areas, and there are 133 clinical trials going on right now, just in psilocybin. Of course, 90% or more of these studies will not yield an appropriate clinical study that can be used in a clinical registration, and no regulatory body around the world will be able to approve anything that comes from these clinical studies. Why is that? Because everyone's playing. They play in this category. They're excited about it. They want to use it in new indications. They want to try new things. They want to give mushrooms, or they want to give pieces of mushrooms, or they want to give something else. They don't want to give the opportunity to get the products into people where they can generate the right data to get a registration. And if anything from evil big pharma has taught me is we know how to get things done. We know how to get things registered. We know how to generate the data that's required to get an approval. And I'd argue that if psychedelic medicine, as I say, it was first discovered, synthesized by evil big pharma, if they had it now, there'd be a product approved probably 15 or 20 years ago. But there will be one approved. And I think that Tryptamine will be the company to get that approval. Within J&J, I spent 4 years in licensing and acquisition, looking at a number of deals across the region, across the world, between 100 million and one of the products that we licensed in 2012 ended up being a $10 billion global product. J&J's licensing, 70% of their pharma group actually get their funding from licensed products, not from internal research. So for those that think that companies have a very big retail and research powerhouse driving these opportunities inside the company, most of the time, most of the products or most of the companies that get purchased is 70% of Janssen's or the J&J Pharma Group's total business. So they love acquisition. They love acquiring companies that have no huge infrastructure. They don't like bringing in lots and lots of people. They like bringing in technology, ideas, and products they can globalize. And that's what I've been taught in terms of how I should run a company. Lean and mean. There's a reason why you should be looking at a company like Tryptamine. Everyone that's looking at psychedelics at the moment is often looking at things like psilocybin, MDMA. You know, these things are not patentable. Compass is doing a huge study in TRD on psilocybin. You can't patent a generic. Now, you can have protection over the indication, potentially, but the more people use psilocybin and the more it's discussed for use in Australia, even at the moment, because as I say, psilocybin is an S8 medication, but there's no approved filing from the TGA as yet. As the head of the TGA said last week, she's looking for data. She's looking for something to give her a reason to believe. And we know that for a fact. So looking at psilocybin and why not? Well, first of all, no IP. Okay, no IP. 8 to 10 hours to go through a session with psilocybin. Now, if you can imagine what it would be like for the patient to go through 8 to 10 hours, imagine what it's like for the physician and the therapist to go through 8 to 10 hours on a bed. Would you rather have it in 2? 1 to 2 hours for IV infusion of psilocin. That's what Tryptamine Therapeutics is building its portfolio around. An infusion, as most would know, it's not an injection, it's not a capsule, it's an IV line that goes for a couple of hours. So rather than spending 8 to 10 hours on a bed wondering when the product you have is going to work, you have an infusion. Within 15 to 20 minutes, you reach a neuroplastic state, and then within 2 hours of that, you're done. Precision targeting of blood levels. No one's been able to really tell you how much blood level you have a certain product at a certain time. If we have the right initiation dose and the right maintenance dose, we will know exactly the amount of product a patient has and can be held at. No dose escalation necessarily required, but the physician can turn up or turn down the infusion. They can also reverse the infusion in the event that it's required. As I've said a number of times, you cannot reverse a capsule. Once you've taken it, you are there for the trip, no matter what happens. You're there for it. And IP, as I mentioned, I do, but also IP is important. So trial pipeline, you'll see them there. And the important thing about these indications, first one, binge eating. Binge eating as an eating disorder, virtually no significantly strong treatments that can be given apart from discussion, therapy. And people would say how they may have binge eating disorder or anorexia for 20 or 30 years. It never really leaves a person. And because there's no effective treatments, they can be thousands and thousands of dollars every year. Hospitalization is required or changes are required. There is no good pharmacologic treatment for binge eating disorder. Neither is there for fibromyalgia. For those that know what fibromyalgia is, it's a neuropathic pain, stems actually from the brain, even though the pain is all over the body. Quite amazing, but quite scary, and very, very painful and intense for those people that either have it or you know of people who do have it. Again, no effective treatment. Almost all these patients are on antidepressants with very little relief. A lot of them are on pregabalin, like Lyrica. In Australia, 90% of people on Lyrica have left that drug within 6 months because it's got a huge side effect profile and limited efficacy, to say the least. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. People would say, well, it might work in binge eating, maybe it works in neuropathic pain, but how would you work in IBS? There's a very significant gut-brain axis when it comes to irritable bowel syndrome. It's a disorder that can be treated with a psychedelic medicine. And the first study, the first patient in this particular study with oral psilocybin has just started in the US. It's with Massachusetts General Hospital, which is the oldest hospital as part of Harvard University. And they came to us asking us for our help. And they've never actually used psilocybin in a study before, which is unusual, but it's one of the largest teaching hospitals in the country, if not the world. and they have their first patient in. We'll know some results in the next quarter. The fibromyalgia I discussed before, we'll know some results on August the 7th. On August the 7th, we will know whether fibromyalgia patients have a significant reduction in pain and symptomatology. So it's a huge opportunity for Tryptamine Therapeutics. Our intention is, of course, to take the oral results and bring them from the US and bring them to Australia and copy those results with small phase 2A trials with IV-infused psilocin. The first patients in the world are currently undergoing IV-infused psilocin in Adelaide at CMAX. We've had 5 patients in now out of 11. And I was there actually in Adelaide for the patient yesterday. So I sat there for 4 hours while they went through their procedure and got treated. And the patient went very well. So we have a number still to go, and we'll get some results of this study in the next, probably the next 2 months. We'll have some data. And assuming we can show in our phase 1B trial, we've got safety, then we can quickly move into our phase 2 program in binge eating. And then by that time, we'll also have our fibromyalgia data. So we'll be looking at when we can move into fibromyalgia. Going back, these conditions, the 3 I mentioned, 100 million people in the world have these conditions and they have inadequate treatment. One of the benefits of tryptamine, knowing I have 1 minute to go, is that we not only have protection of our crystal format of psilocin. Psilocin is historically extremely desirable to move out of its current state. It does not last. It lasts 24 hours in solution as its own drug. So you have to find a crystal forms where you can stabilize that product. We have one. We have patents around it. And we have patents around the crystal form as well of other products that can be made with psilocin. You have to have protection around the way you deliver a product to a patient. We currently have patents pending for IV infusion of psilocybin or psilocin into a patient globally, not just in Australia. The indication with which we're looking at, the 3 I mentioned, binge eating disorder, fibromyalgia, and IBS. We have patents pending on those indications globally for psilocybin and psilocin. So we cannot be taken on by competitors looking to work into the same space globally. Okay, and for a $20 million company and 100 million people that basically have these disorders, if we can show that they work in the 3 indications we've discussed, and we already have shown in the first, in binge eating, and the reason why I joined the company in the first place is an 80% reduction in binge eating episodes was shown, and an 80% reduction also in people feeling like they needed to binge eat. This data has never been shown in any other product for that condition ever. So if we can show something similar for the other 2 as well, it looks very, very good for tryptamine. But more information, please come and talk to me outside, but thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's interesting, isn't it? The people trickling in at the back there and staying. We've got another one for you to think of in the biotech world now. They've got 1 drug in phase 2. They've got 4 trials underway. One might say massively undervalued when you look at their balance sheet at the moment. So we're going to have a chat with Gary Phillips. Gary is the CEO of Syntara. Hello, Gary.
Hi there.
You've been a busy boy lately, haven't you?
I have.
Yeah, very, very busy with all the trials going on. So what Syntara is all about, they're a clinical stage drug development company working to bring new and life-changing treatments to patients in need. And I'm going to let you, Gary, just explain more and not take up any more of your time. Would you please make him very welcome, everyone?
Thank you. So apologies for my voice. I've got that post-influenza thing going on for the minute. I'm not expecting to be able to convince you in 15 minutes of the science behind 15 people I've got working in French's Forest in labs that have been working on drug programs for 15 years and generating new intellectual property. I want to make the proposition to you in 15 minutes about the things that might sway you in terms of becoming an investor. So who else is invested in the stock? How much work have they done and how much diligence have they done before they bought? What kind of stake do they have? I want to talk to you a little bit about the board. It's a really important thing. Who else is putting their name behind this? Who else is managing your company for you if you're an investor? And then finally, looking at the news flow. So I'll go through the science briefly, but it's really then in terms of an investment you're making now, what's likely to happen to that in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, depending on your time frame as an investor. So, Syntara. We are first and foremost a clinical development biotech company. So we have assets not just in preclinical, we haven't just cured a mouse. We've got drugs that are in the clinic in patient studies at the moment. We've got a well-validated science program that's been going, as I said, for more than 15 years. And we generate our own intellectual property. So none of the drugs I'm talking about here have been licensed in from somebody else. They're not repurposed, they haven't been used before. Their own invention. The intellectual property we're generating is 100% owned by the company and is patented worldwide. They're also new patents. So the drugs I'm talking about were patented as recently as 3 or 4 years ago and are already in phase 2. So a lot of patent life in front of them. Not only have we generated that, with the experienced board and management we have, that's been really well published. So the science platform there has been published in Nature publication, which is the highest impact scientific journal worldwide. So there's a lot of reasons why you should think and look at us and say they've proven what they can do. Lastly, but most importantly on that point, we're backed by about 60% institutional investors, about 50, actually about 55 now. That's very unusual. You will not find many biotechs in Australia, let alone one for less than, with a market cap of less than 50 million, with a register like ours. It's full of big names of specialist healthcare investors who've been with us a long time and invested on the back of a lot of research that they've done. We're focused on blood cancers, so 2 of them, myelofibrosis, which is a cancer of the bone marrow, and myelodysplastic syndrome, another type of bone cancer, blood cancer. The first of those in myelofibrosis has already got an IND approved by the FDA. We've already got orphan drug approval. We're in a phase 2 study now. We've already reported on one phase 2 study, which I'll talk about, and we're in a second phase 2 study, which is reporting later this year. We're not a one-shot on goal company. So it's not your investment in us doesn't all resolve on one single asset with one time point and one trial result. We have 3 different programs, one in blood cancers, one in skin scarring, which we're working with Fiona Wood, Professor Fiona Wood in Perth, and the last one backed heavily by Parkinson's UK on a sleep disorder where patients develop Parkinson's disease. All of those ongoing phase 2 studies that will produce results, some of them as early as December, some of them by the second half of next year. And then lastly, the commercial opportunity. The indications that we're working in, particularly in the blood cancer area, have resulted in exits for companies with data in the one stage beyond us at the end of phase 3 in the order of $2 billion in the last 3 years. So this is a really attractive area, really focusing a lot of attention of the companies with franchises in blood cancers, and we're starting to emerge into that area and showing our data as we go forward for the rest of the year. So the next thing, just to spend on the register. So we came out of a trading halt this morning. We raised $5 million. It wasn't a raise that I wanted to do. We raised money at 2.2 in December, $10 million. If you look at the share graph on the left-hand side, I'm doing this just so you understand the dynamics of this and you see where is there an opportunity or what's going on. In January, one of the funds that had 10% of our company, our stock was in a closed fund. They had to exit. They chose to exit in January, which is, all of you know, exiting in January, 10% of somebody's stock is difficult to find buyers. They exited at 1.5 cents. And some of that stock went into sticky hands, good hands. A lot of it went into hands where people were trading and want to make some profit. So in the next 2 quarters, the overhang from that exit stayed with us and we bobbled around under the 2 cents until we got rid of the overhang. And in the last couple of months, we've been more buyers and sellers and the price rose up to 4 cents. We have on our balance sheet an acquirer of a business that we sold in Q4 last year. They owed us $5 million. It became clear at the end of the last financial year in June that both the timing and the quantum of that amount they owed us, they dispute. We think our position is strong, but it left us as a company needing to fill the hole there because we could no longer call that a recoverable debt under what we were doing. So we raised 5 million. We raised that this morning. 2.8 cents was based on a 30-day VWAP of the stock. And we've got strong news flows from now on going forward. But if you look at the bottom right-hand section of that chart, you'll see DNA Income, a 20% holder of our stock, been with us since 2010. Platinum Investment Management, a holder of 17% of our stock, been with us for the last 2 raises. Bianca Ogden, the leader of that fund, is a bellwether in healthcare investment in Australia. And BVF Partners, a very, very large East Coast US healthcare specialist fund. All of these funds have done a lot of diligence on us. 2 of them have made money in myelofibrosis, which is the lead asset I'm in. So you could call them institutional insiders in that they understand the market, they understand the data, they understand the competition and where we're going. So that's why I say that at 30 million market cap as we stand today, this stock has a long, long way to go with data coming in later on in the year. The board, also a stellar board that, again, I think would grace a billion-dollar company. Our chair is Kathleen Metters. Kathleen was the head of basic research at Merck, global Merck, for 4 years. She had a budget of $3 billion and staff in the thousands. We were her first company that she chose to go to after retirement. She's a somewhat of a rock star in biotech terms. Simon Green ran plasma research at CSL for 10 years, a global career with CSL. Myself and Hashan De Silva. Hashan is a well-known healthcare analyst, really backs his analysis, did a lot of work on us before joining us. So a great board to think about when you're thinking about an investment in us. Our science is based around fibrosis. If you cut yourself, the wound floods the area with collagen fibers. Those collagen fibers then get knitted into a mesh with an enzyme called lysyl oxidase. You could think of this in an analogy of if you go to Bunnings and buy yourself some fiberglass, if you've got a hole in your speedboat or your boat, your car, or anything like that you want to mend, you buy fiberglass mesh and it's all loose, weave, floppy, and you buy a hardener. You add the hardener to the mesh and it forms a really hard, tough skin. The same thing happens with your body. If you have an injury, and it can be in an organ or your skin, it could be your heart, your kidney, your liver, your lung, your bone marrow, the body floods the area with these protein fibers, collagen, and then the enzyme lysyl oxidase is the hardener, which causes the cross-links, which then causes the fibrotic tissue. Fibrotic tissue is non-functional tissue. It doesn't behave itself. So if you have a fibrotic liver, your liver doesn't work as well as a non-fibrotic liver. If you have a fibrotic bone marrow, your bone marrow doesn't function like a normal person's do. So we have a drug which inhibits lysyl oxidase, almost over 90% taken as a tablet twice a day. So it's a very effective treatment. We know the drug is antifibrotic. We know we hit the enzyme fully, and we've got data to demonstrate that. We've published all this preclinical data in Nature publications, as I said, and we're targeting myelofibrosis. Myelofibrosis is a fibrosis of your bone marrow. Your bone marrow is the production unit for producing red cells, white cells, and platelets. So if you have myelofibrosis, you become anemic, you bleed more, you have more infections. You have a life expectancy of about 5 years. The only current treatment is a JAK inhibitor. JAK inhibitors treat the symptoms of this disease, but they don't do anything about the underlying condition, the fibrosis in the bone marrow. Our drug, working alongside a JAK inhibitor, should extend the life of these patients and allow them to take their drugs more on. Despite only being symptomatic, JAK inhibitors sell more than $1 billion a year in this indication alone, which is why I say this is such an attractive market. So there's a great medical need, which is why so many companies are looking at this area and hoping to capitalize on it. Our first study was in patients who had failed on the JAK inhibitor. So out of the 5 years of life, they only had 1 year left. They were end of life. It's a study that was approved by the FDA to go forward with. It was for 6 months, and we reported this data at the American Society of Hematology in December last year. I won't go through the details of the study, but it's just interesting to look. This is the opinion of a leading US physician, Professor Masarova from MD Anderson in the US. She was commenting, saying that the first thing is this drug is incredibly safe. Most of the drugs being trialed in myelofibrosis cause problems. They cause cytopenias. They cause drops in red cells and white cells and platelets. To have a drug that's well tolerated is a huge thing for them to go into the clinic. But clearly it needs to work as well. In half the patients we trialed in this study, we showed a 1-grade improvement in their fibrosis. So we can show that their fibrosis in the bone marrow is dropping in 6 months. And a lot of the patients had either stable or improving blood counts and symptoms over the same period. So this is enormously encouraging. We took it back to the FDA in the 3rd quarter of last year. They said, great, keep going. So we're now conducting a study which is in patients who are on a JAK inhibitor. So no longer the patients at the end of their 5-year life expectancy. This is patients at the beginning of their journey. We're aiming to recruit 15 patients. We've recruited 14 out of the 15. We have active sites in Australia, Taiwan, South Korea, and the US. It's a multinational study being run under an IND by the FDA. We will shortly announce full recruitment of that study. The first data from that study will be presented at the American Society of Hematology the first week of December this year. It's an open label study, so we see the data as it goes along. I can tell you that the study is already showing that our drug is still safe in this patient population. We don't see any dropouts according to the drug or serious adverse events. So this is a really exciting phase that's going to drive news flow and value as we get towards the end of the year. The study will then go on and report the 12-month data from it, because we're following these patients for longer, this time next year. But in the 1st quarter of next year, we'll already be back in front of the FDA. They only want to see 6 months data. So we'll be showing them data and discussing with them the pivotal phase 3 registration study that we would do after this in order to get commercialization of the product. That data, combined with the opinion of the FDA, will drive interest from strategic partners, big pharma companies that have an interest in there. We're talking about GSK, Bristol Myers Squibb, Novartis, Incyte. These are all companies that are following the data that we've got and waiting to see what we produce in December. I mentioned at the beginning about the exit values in this area. There's just 3 deals that have been done in the last 3 years. 1.7, 1.9. The last one, nearly $3 billion taken for companies with an asset in this area. And all of them with drugs that have safety issues as well. So we think our drug stacks up well against these. We think there's a space in the market for us, and we're hoping to demonstrate that with the data we produce in December. I mentioned at the outset that it wasn't just one drug. It's a busy slide, but we've got that program in myelofibrosis. We've got non-dilutive funding from the Australian Medical Research Futures Fund, the MRFF, to do a study in myelodysplastic syndrome, which will start later this year. That's going to be an Australian study. We should have the first data out of that by the middle of next year. We've got 2 studies that are either planned or ongoing with Fiona Wood in Perth, looking at skin scarring. So we have another drug, exactly the same as the one being used in blood cancer, different chemical matter being formulated as a cream, which is being applied to scars to make them disappear or stop them forming. And lastly, a drug in Parkinson's disease, which we got $5 million worth of funding from Parkinson's UK in order to do this study, which again, recruiting now sites in the UK and Australia with data due by the middle of next year. So in terms of news flow, a really exciting period for the company. As I said, the journey on the share price we think is just starting. It's going to be driven by active recruitment and outcome from these studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Even more interesting, while we were sitting just then, I had a text message come through from home in Perth, Western Australia, and interesting in terms of what you're doing and also our next presenter is doing. It came from a friend of mine's husband who just let us all know that she's just passed away from a blood cancer, and just said the blood, and you think, gee, if only you could just hold on, and if only these things could be fast-tracked and we could get hold of them a little bit quicker. So the mission of our next company is to change the way that cancer is treated. I want you to imagine, you've been diagnosed with cancer and you can simply walk into it, almost like a supermarket. Imagine this, and pick the little cells that you need to treat your cancer and just infuse them into your body, and off you go. So, right, well, that's problem solved. Imagine that in the future. Chimeric Therapeutics is led by this amazing human being, COO, Dr. Rebecca McQualter. She's also currently their acting CEO, but very hopeful to be able to announce to you the new CEO in the next few days. She won't be tell who it is at the moment, but she's got a lot on her plate. They've currently got 3 amazing technologies that they are looking into and running all in phase 1 trials. Interestingly, and this is in her words, while I was out there having a chinwag to her, saying, "What is it that you've got? What's the value prospect? Why is it valued so low?" She said, "Frankly, Christina, cheap as chips." That's what we are right now. We're cheap as chips. So let's have a listen and see if we should get on board with this amazing tech she's proposing. Please make her welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. I just want to take a minute to think about your friend, and she's the reason why that I get up every single day, and I have done for the last 20 years, to change the way that we treat cancer. So I have a PhD in cell therapy, and since I was a baby uni student, I've always wanted to make a change. So it's unfortunate that we lost your friend, but I really hope we can make a difference for some more patients. As Christina mentioned, my name's Rebecca McQualter, and I'm leading up Chimeric Therapeutics, and I'm very proud to lead Chimeric into its new era. We are pioneers in cell therapy, and I can actually say that because we've got 2 of the most amazing cell therapy assets that nobody else has in the world. Let's see if this works. Here's my disclaimer. So we are a cancer cell therapy company. We have 3 amazing assets, 2 CAR-Ts and 1 natural killer cell platform. All of these assets are in phase 1. We have 4 trials running all across the US, and it's my job to bring some of that home to Australia. So really quickly, if we move through the investment highlights, there's a lot here, and as I mentioned, we're cheap as chips right now, and I'm new to the finance game. I come from big pharma, and I can't really understand how valuations are placed on companies, so I'd love for somebody to teach me. But we've got assets in the clinic, we've treated 30 patients, we've got first-in-class technology, and we're still sitting at around a 16 million market cap. And as of March 31, we had roughly just under 10 million cash in the bank. We've raised 70 million to date, and I've only been at the helm for 3 months, so that has nothing to do with me, but they did a really good job to get the assets up and out and into the clinic. And our major shareholder, who most of you will know, is Mr. Paul Hopper. So over the next 12 months, we'll have multiple updates, and I'm going to run you through our 3 assets, and it's a really busy time at Chimeric Therapeutics. We'll have multiple clinical catalysts for our CDH17 program, which is our lead program at the moment, and also one of our other programs which are being paid for by MD Anderson Cancer Centre. Now, I can't do this by myself, but I am here by myself in Australia, and I've got a very experienced team in the US, and I've got 5 people in the US. All of us have worked for Big Pharma. We've all worked in cell therapy. We all know how hard it is, and we've spent a lot of time actually crying bringing cell therapies to market. So my chief medical officer worked at Juno, my head of manufacturing, who's worth his weight in gold, he used to run manufacturing for Kite Global. So I'm very, very lucky to have him with me. And he's been very busy the last week, and I'll give you an update on what he's been up to. So CDH17, which is our lead asset, is the only CDH17 CAR-T in the world. And we are first in line to take that into a patient very, very shortly. And I'm very proud that we've done the heavy lifting to take this out of the lab into a commercially scalable GMP manufacturing process, and we're ready to rock. Our first patient was enrolled about 2 weeks ago. Another first-in-class asset is what the company IPO'd on, which is our chlorotoxin CAR-T. And this is for the nasty brain cancer glioblastoma. We had some really encouraging phase 1 results, and we've treated 1 patient, and we're going to make this trial even better, and I'm going to try to bring it to the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre in Melbourne. And for us, you know, moving so quickly through all of these particular milestones, we're really conscious that it takes time to develop a molecule. And so all of our molecules that we have a long, robust patent life. And I'm very lucky that I've got a lot of friends that work at Novartis, that work at Amgen, that work at Glaxo and AstraZeneca that we can keep talking to So when we're ready to partner, I'll keep my friends waiting in the wings, which is great. So I just really want to stop for a second and explain what cell therapy is. And I just really want to make sure that you walk away today saying, hey, that girl Rebecca, she's into cell therapy, and cell therapy is we take your cells, we put them in the lab, we give them the instructions to kill cancer, we put them back into you, and away they go. They teach your immune system how to kill cancer. Does that make sense? Yeah? What's the gun? Very good question. I've got a few guns, let me tell you. Our first gun, let's use that. CHM CDH17. These are precise coordinates to find gastric cancer, pancreatic cancer, and bowel cancer. We've just enrolled our first patient in this particular trial. And this is a phase 1/2 trial. And the reason why a phase 1/2 trial is exciting is because once we prove it's safe and once the FDA say, hey, you're safe, we can move into phase 2 without any more paperwork. So my team are so clever, they've set us up for success from the beginning. But this particular target, we'll put them on the immune cells that we take out of you, and then once we infuse them back in, they'll be hunting for that bowel cancer. This patient that we've enrolled, he's only 27 and he's got stage 4 bowel cancer. We want to make a big difference in his life, and I'm going out in September to meet him, and I'm very excited to meet him, and I can't wait for him to be dosed. Now, I did mention my head of manufacturing before, right? He's been really busy. We took these 27-year-old cells out, we flew them to Philadelphia to UPenn to be manufactured, and my head of manufacturing has been sitting there all week, and he's been sending me photos of how happy the cells look and how good the cells look. So we're getting ready to dose the first patients shortly, and I'm really impressed with the progress that we've made. We've actually just signed an agreement with the big hospital based at UPenn there, so they're coming on as a site now. So are MD Anderson Cancer Centre and UChicago as well. And we aim to bring this to Australia, hopefully in the next 6 months, if I can get my tech transfer skills down pat and make it a little bit faster. But we're really excited about the impact that we can make with CDH17. And I'm really looking forward to sharing more updates with you. We hope to have 3 updates about this particular asset in the next 12 months. And first will be the safety profile of this particular asset. If we move on to the second asset, which is our chlorotoxin program, this is for the nasty brain cancer glioblastoma. This is technology out of City of Hope, and we had some amazing results in the phase 1A trial to demonstrate that the molecule was safe. And we're actually injecting these cells back into the brain. So we're taking them out of the patient's blood, we're manufacturing them, and they go right back straight into where the cancer is. We've made a decision to make this even better than what it currently is. So we're going to tweak the protocol. We're adding a few bits and pieces. I've taken a look at the program. Our scientific advisory board took a look at the program, and there's a few steps that we can include to really give these cells the best shot that they have. And we're working with Peter Mac on a new protocol, which will be really exciting. And I'm excited to take this forward because there's a lot of patients with the nasty brain cancer that really need our help. Moving on to my final asset, in my final 5 minutes, I can't believe how fast it's gone. This is our Core NK platform, and you would have heard the amazing work of Arabella before about natural killer cells. And these cells are like the Batman of our immune system. They walk around fighting viruses, punching cancer in the face. And so what we can do with these now is we can take some from a healthy donor, we can produce multiple doses, have them sitting in the pharmacy ready to rock for the patient. It's a lot more cost effective than making the CAR Ts, and we can actually use it on demand if you like, which is fantastic. Now, I won't say that I have a favourite child, but I did a lot of work on this in my PhD, and so I'm very, very familiar with this particular technology. Long before my time at Chimeric, MD Anderson Cancer Centre, the world's biggest cancer centre, rang Chimeric and said, hey, we want to pay for a trial and we want your Core NK platform. And of course, they said yes, thank goodness. So both of these programs at the end are actually paid for, so I'm very happy with that. The trial at MD Anderson is actually targeting a nasty blood cancer called acute myeloid leukemia, and that's going really well and it's moving really fast. And I actually spoke to one of the clinicians this morning because during our phase 1A of this particular trial, we had a really positive result from a patient that had the nasty blood cancer. She's actually now, she's been living for 18 months without any signs of cancer, which is absolutely amazing. And so I'm thinking of your friend Christine, and when I spoke about this patient this morning, we're really having an impact here, and we don't know what it looks like yet, but there's definitely steps that we're moving to see some promising outcomes. We're also testing this platform at Case Western, where the technology came out from in colorectal cancer or bowel cancer, and we think it's a really unique angle, and we can use this to use standard of care, things like Keytruda. I'm sure you would have heard of Keytruda, in addition to this off-the-shelf cell therapy product, to see how we go against solid tumours. So with that, I'd really like you to walk away, have a look at our ticker, have a look at our cheap bargain basement price. I'm really proud to be leading Chimeric now, and I really can't wait to share more news with you to take Chimeric to the next level, and we're pioneers in cell therapy.
Well done, you left yourself with 2 minutes. I'm not.
Yes,
Does anyone
no.
have a desperate question they'd like to ask? You have to do it quickly in 2 minutes or less. Anyone? He's dropped the water.
Yeah,
He's
we've
so expressive.
got a question down the front here.
Yep, go far away.
What are you doing? Have you got $10 million for me? Yeah. Oh, where? So mostly retail investors from that 70 million that was raised before my time, yeah. Before my time, yes. I've only been here for 3 months.
There we go. We're going to have to leave it there. So we'll have to leave it there. I've only
my
got
problem,
the 1
yes.
minute and a half. Thank you very, very
you.
much. If you want to go and address it further, please go and have a chat with her afterwards. And I'm sorry about that. I shouldn't have opened up the floor to questions. I'm already getting the naughty person stick from James out the back. I'm getting hot in here. Is anyone else hot in this room, or is it just me? Can I have a show of hands? Are you comfortable? Please raise your hands. Is it too warm? Please raise your hands. Gee whiz, that's a bit of an issue. Okay, so we either take items of clothing off, we put them on, or we get someone to invent some sort of tech. Do you know that the air conditioning system in hotels is designed for a man in his 50s wearing a 3-piece suit? There you go. I think they need to maybe progress that and do something a bit different. It's like in my car, I've got individual heating for each seat on each side. There you go. Nicholas Smedley, where are you, sir? You're our second last person to go. There you go, the well-dressed man behind me, excuse me. So Nicholas is the chairman of Findi. He's a really strong advocate for strengthening bilateral relationships between Australia and India, particularly through his role as chairman of Findi. So Findi is an ASX-listed fintech company offering tailored payment services through its network of ATMs and digital payment platforms in India. That's one of the largest and fastest growing markets. 3 million customers, is that correct? About 3 million customers a day?
Approximately,
Yeah, is using this little bit of tech. So that's 6% of all cash. Is it still? You increased it since I last...
Gone up slightly to about 7.5.
Which is one heck of a lot of cash. So what's the potential? What's the potential for us as investors? Let's have a listen to this man. Please make him very welcome.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's my great pleasure to present here again at TechWise, 12 months on from my last presentation here. There's been a lot to update in the last 12 months. As a business, we reported our full year financials just over a month ago, which was 66.5 million in revenue, 27.4 million in EBITDA, and 4 million of NPAT for the year, which we're very happy with. But as was just touched on before, Findi is now one of the largest non-bank ATM and payments businesses across India, I'll go into more detail the two key segments being across ATMs and digital payments through Findi Pay. And more than 1.2 odd billion transactions are processed by us a year, and as a result, more than 2.7 to 3 million people a day use our products and services every single day. So as a Victorian, every 2 days, the population of Victoria uses our service. That's just the size and scale of the opportunity across India. As a business, we have two key areas of operation. The first of that is ATM solutions. We have two segments to that. We have a division where we own and operate the ATM. We have approximately 8,000 ATMs that we have deployed across India with major banks like Central Bank of India and State Bank of India. That derives about 99% of our revenue for that division. And then we also manage about 13,500 white label ATMs on behalf of BTI, which is the largest white label operator in India. They don't actually operate their own ATMs. They entrust us to operate them on their behalf. That's how highly regarded we are on that, in that segment of the market in India. We also then have Findi Pay. Findi Pay is our digital division where we have more than 34,000 merchant locations across India. We currently operate in just over 5 states. The board has made it a capital investment in this division this year. We're targeting to deliver by the end of this financial year more than 60,000 locations across India and doubling the amount of states that we operate in. But I'll go into a little bit more detail later on about this exciting division of ours. The market opportunity that's really ahead of us is India has 1.4 billion plus in population, but it has 350 million people that are currently unbanked. And that means none of those 350 million people actually have a physical bank account, so they are completely cash. Then one step further up the totem pole, so to speak, there's 450 million people in India that have a bank account, but they actually haven't accessed it in the last 6 months. So part of our job is to service that underbanked market of more than 800 million across India. Cash in circulation has increased at 16% compound annual growth over the last 5 odd years. Cash as a percentage of GDP has also gone from 6% some 4 years ago to more than 13% of GDP as it stands at the moment, which is significant growth. On the flip side, digital is also growing across India. So both our digital division and our physical ATM division are experiencing significant growth, which I'll go into now. As I've mentioned, we have diversified operations. We're in every state and territory across India, which is fantastic. We're the only pan-India operator of ATMs and digital solution services that we're aware of. We have a fantastic organic growth structure for us. We're expecting to deploy more than 4,000 ATMs organically this year. I've also told the market about well-advanced acquisition opportunities that we're currently progressing. I was literally in India last week, and I'm hopeful to be able to make announcements in that front in the coming quarter. As said, great market opportunity for where we're positioned. Diversified operations, as mentioned. The growth strategy, both inorganic and organic, but with 4,000 ATMs being deployed organically, I'll talk about what that will give us for FY25 and beyond. We have a significant pipeline of additional new contracts that we're tendering for at the moment. There's a significant tendering process that's underway at the moment. We submitted the applications or the submissions last week, and we expect to find out in the coming month or so the outcome of that tender, which we're very positive on. As said, we're the largest operator of ATMs across India, and we have the leading position whereby the largest white label operator doesn't even operate their own ATMs, they entrust us to do so. And we have a great management team in India, a team of more than 700 on the ground over there, spread between our head office in Delhi and our back office operations in Mumbai, in Pune, apologies. We've delivered a number of key milestones over the last 12 months. The first of those major ones was a significant contract renewal or contract win with the State Bank of India. That was a great milestone for us in October of last year. That over a 10-year period, a 7+3 contract will deliver more than 600 million in revenue It'll also deliver more than 230 odd million dollars in EBITDA over that time period. So it's great to have such large, robust contracts underpinning our numbers as we move forward. We also had a significant investment from Pyramid Alternative Investments in November of last year. They invested just shy of 30 odd million dollars in the business. It was a great acknowledgement and, how can I put it, a tick of approval for our business strategy and operations. They spent more than 6 months due diligence into the business. The fund that actually invested is the Pyramid Alternative Investments, which is 75% backed by the Quebec State Pension Fund, and then 25% backed by the Pyramid family itself. Pyramid would be one of the largest top 5 families across India, and they're a great cornerstone investor for us as we go towards our IPO aspirations for our division in India in FY27, so another 2 years away. We also had significant options convert in January of this year. So all in all, we've delivered capital to the group of about 48 odd million dollars, leading to a great cash position, which I'll go into a little bit later, of in excess of 106 million dollars of cash at 31 March of this year just gone. We've had a good share price performance as well. Since the start of the year, we're up about 3.6 times. I think we're trading well at the moment, but it's still very modest multiples. That's 5.3, 5.4 times EBITDA, historic EBITDA, I might add, and formal guidance will be coming out from the company on Thursday. But compared to our Australian ASX peers, they're trading at north of 13 times, and then our Indian peers are trading at more than 23 times. So significant upside from our peer analysis there as well. So as said, we had strong performance from our financials that we've just delivered. We secured the new SBI agreement, which is 7+3. We've raised more than 48 million dollars in total capital, which enables us to deliver all of our new contracts that we've awarded. That SBI contract is fully funded, and we also have enough cash on balance sheet to fund a number of acquisitions that we're highly advanced in. And I've told the market before that the first 2 that we're looking at are fully funded with cash on balance sheet. So a great position to be in. We also secured our provisional white label ATM license in April of this year. I can confirm now that we will be lodging our final stage of audit review in the month of August, so in a few days' time, which puts us well on track for deploying the first of our white label ATMs in early second half or from October of this year, which is exactly on plan. So we've spoken about the significant expansion opportunity, and one of those is in Findi Pay itself. As I said earlier, we now have more than 34,000 locations across India. Last month alone, we delivered more than 3,000 new merchants in that business, and the month before that, we delivered 2,800. So that business is accelerating very nicely since we gave the additional capital to that business from July of last year. We currently have 7 products and services that we focus on in that business. I've started to talk about the fact that we're exploring partnership opportunities with our existing banks that we provide ATM services to. Those are very advanced at the moment. I hopefully will be able to talk about them in more detail in the coming month. But the reason why I'm very excited about that is it'll take our 7 products and services that this division currently offers customers to more than 42. So there's 35 new products and services that we'll be offering in partnership with one of the leading banks in India. I won't go into detail on the financials. As I've already said, we're very happy with the results. We outperformed on revenue. In terms of growth, we had significant growth in EBITDA, outperforming EBITDA guidance. NPAT was delivered in line, and we had strong cash from operations generation, which was great. As I've mentioned, net cash position for the group, our gross cash on balance sheet at 31 March available for use in the business was in excess of 106 million dollars, so a very strong balance sheet. No requirement of capital moving forward. All growth that I've spoken about is funded from either free cash flow and operations or existing cash on balance sheet. So very strong position, and the only way to get involved is online online buying of the shares on market at the moment. As I've spoken about, we have the traditional side of the business, which is our physical ATM side. It's a strong cash-generating division, growing 25% plus year on year. We've got 4,000 ATMs that we'll be deploying organically this year. Those ATMs on a full year basis will deliver in excess of 25 million in additional revenue and $7 to $9 million of additional EBITDA. So great organic growth. We also have the elephant in the room, but this is a good elephant in the room. If you Google Indian interchange rates, there is a large speculation at the moment that the interchange rate could be going for as high as 21 to 23 rupees per transaction. It's currently at 17. Now that we have a white label license, we're part of the discussions. We're a little more conservative. We think that the interchange rate will increase, but it'll only increase to 19. Exactly what the RBI did some 2 years ago when it went from 15 to 17 rupees. And a full year impact of just a 2 rupee increase on our business increases our bottom line by more than $10 million for a full year impact. So, and we expect that to be announced sometime this year. And when I say this year, this financial year, i.e. by 31 March 2025. On the digital side of the business, as I've mentioned, the presentation's a little bit out of date because we've been growing so rapidly. We're now at 34,000 locations, growing in excess of 3,000 locations per month. We have a target of being more than 60,000 locations by the end of this financial year for us. In terms of our strategy and where we're at, the last 2 years has really been cementing our cost base, making sure our operations are primed for growth, and we've really been looking internally for the last 2 years. As of January of this year, we've delivered $48 million of additional capital. We're fully funded moving forward, and we're there looking to expand now both the profile through investor relations, these types of conferences, and really institutionalise the register, which we have been slowly doing over the last 6 months, and it's been good to see a number of new funds join the register. One of the reasons why funds are looking to join, as well as additional shareholders have been driving the share price, is the arbitrage value. As I spoke about earlier, we're looking to list our subsidiary in India, which is TSI India. Just on a comparison on the numbers we delivered for the last financial year of 31 March 2024, our listed peers would value us between 500 and 800 million market cap, let alone the growth that we will be delivering between now and FY27 when we plan to list. So we're targeting to appoint investment banks by December of this year. We're then looking to have our regulatory filings lodged by December 2025, and we expect that to be about a 6-month approval process, meaning that the second half of calendar year 2026 is our listing window, which will be open for 12 months, and with 2 additional years of growth, plus the Indian trading multiples of 23 to 28 odd times historic EBITDA, we see significant upside for all shareholders in that listing event, and that's what we're working towards over the next 2 years. If there's any other questions, my contact details are at the bottom of every ASX announcement. By all means, please give me a call or send me an email. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, to leave that there, you may not steal that, regardless how many other bits of tech you have. Team, one last presentation to go. So then this one is all about solving medical problems in oncology. So if any of you actually undergone cancer treatment, you'll know that one of the side effects of successfully beating cancer can be issues with your heart. The drugs that are used can often have some rather nasty effects on your heart. So Race Oncology is our last presentation. So take anything you've ever heard about Race Oncology, just throw it out the window right now, because I want you all to start again from point A. And this is the fellow that's going to enlighten you, Dr. Daniel Tillett. Would you please make him very welcome? Give him a big round of applause.
I love it.
So if we're not at drinks afterwards and perhaps the discussion goes on a little bit longer, you know, everything gets pushed back a bit longer, I'm going to blame this fella here because I was having a chat with him outside. It's bloody interesting stuff he's got to talk to us about. We're going to find out, they believe they have a solution to this problem with the heart. So a drug that could A, treat cancer better, and B, could remove this issue that it seems to be so prevalent with those of us who have survived cancer to do with the heart. Would you please make him welcome again? You can't clap him enough. Clap him one more time, please. Thank you.
So I'm going to spend 5 minutes on this slide. What I'm really going to spend time on is talking to you about cancer survivorship. What's happened over the last 50 years is we've really improved how we treat cancer patients. Many patients are living years, decades after they have treatment, particularly young cancer patients. And this creates this problem of what's known as cancer survivorship. So cancer is a terrible disease, horrific disease, but as we've got better at treating it, people are living longer and they're living with the consequences of treatment. The way that cancer treatment, particularly the traditional chemotherapeutic drugs work, or radiation, or surgery, is they cause damage to the entire body. And the body, certain parts of the body, particularly the cardiovascular system, can't recover from that damage. So if you get treated with chemotherapy, you can expect that your heart will age between 15 and 20 years of the experience of going through that. And you can think about that, if you're 60 or 65 and you get a 20-year older heart than your actual current age, you've suddenly got an 85-year-old heart. And for many of you who know what aging does to you, I look around and there's plenty of experience here in the room. You know that you're not the same person that you were 20 years ago. And this is a huge problem. There's a need to make sure that when you're treated for cancer, you're not only treated and cured of your cancer, but also left in a healthy state. It's pretty obvious that we need to improve chemotherapy. And why do we need to improve chemotherapy? We get told about all these exciting targeted agents, cell therapies, all the rest of this that goes on in cancer. And it's very exciting scientifically. I'm a scientist by profession. I love to read all about these sorts of things, but the reality is, even when you try your hardest to find targeted agent or cell therapy, the majority of patients, 85% of patients, are going to get treated with chemotherapy, the traditional chemotherapies that have been around for decades. And the reason for that is we don't have enough of these targeted agents. They're slowly improving. Every year we get a few more, but cancer is such a diverse disease that there's just no way of treating everyone that comes in. 10% of patients, they don't even know where the cancer comes from. You just turn up, you've got metastatic cancer around the body. They can't even tell you the organ that it originated in. These sorts of things are not going to respond to targeted agents. So we need to improve it. The class of drug, chemotherapeutic, that's most widely used around the world is a class called anthracyclines. The most commonly used one of these is one called doxorubicin. It's originally discovered back in the 1970s. It's used in an enormous range of cancers. You can see there on the right-hand side, and an enormous number of doses are given every year. Over 20 million doses around the world. And this is just for one of the class of this particular drug. It's a massive market existing. And the reason why it's such a massive market is because they're so effective. They work in so many different cancers. They were originally developed from a microorganism that grew in the soil. Turns out they're really good at killing other microorganisms. It turns out also that they're really good at killing cancer cells. So we have a drug called bisantrene. It falls into the same sort of class. It's a chemotherapeutic drug. And it was originally developed in the 1980s by a company called Ledley Laboratories. They took it through more than 50 clinical trials, 1,500 patients, all the way through to approval in France for acute myeloid leukemia. There was a large phase 3 breast cancer trial that was run, very, very successful, and yet at the end of that process, they dropped it. And the reason why they dropped it is because the drug could not be delivered easily to a patient. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the future, but this is often something that people forget. Sometimes really good drugs that work really well in patients get dropped for I guess, clinical reasons. They get dropped for commercial reasons. And they found that it was too difficult to actually deliver to patients, and they ended up having to make the decision to advance another cancer drug they had at the time. I should actually spend a little bit of time on the corporate snapshot here, because we're an unusual company in that we've had quite a bit of a dip in the last year, and that we've come back from that as we've, I guess, focused on our current strategy, which I'll talk a little bit more about. We also happen to have run a piggyback and bonus option offer, which gives us an extra $5 million. We now have $17.2 million in cash, allowing us to be fully funded basically to the end of the decade through the combination of these two options, which is really nice. So you saw what happened with Syntara. They had to go back to the market and raise capital, which they didn't want to. And that's not, you don't want to be an investor in a company that's about to raise capital. You want to be invested in a company that you can rely on, has the cash to actually get everything they wanted to get done. Mentioned before about the clinical history of bisantrene. It's an amazing drug, works really well. A couple of girls there, there's this picture from France that were treated, they're still alive, they've got their own families. It's a drug that actually really works. And as an investor in a biotech company, the biggest thing that you don't know the answer to is, will this drug work? Particularly if you go from preclinical in mice. Lots of drugs work really well at curing mice of cancer, but only about 3% of those drugs actually turn out to be something that will work in humans. It's a really high risk investment. It's really great if you can start with a drug that you know actually works, that's got all the way through to approval. We know that our drug works really well in combination with doxorubicin. That's the first big tick. We've gone in, we've done some studies, we found that it works across a wide range of different cancers. We looked at 143 different cancer types and found that basically our drug works with all of those, well, not every single, but every single cancer type. And in 85% of cases, it improves the cancer killing properties of doxorubicin, the leading chemotherapeutic agent. Most importantly, it didn't interfere the cancer killing in the 15% that it didn't improve. It was neutral. And that's really important from an oncologist's point of view. People who treat cancer, they don't want to take a drug that will potentially interfere with an effective drug they know works. The other thing that we've discovered, and this is something that wasn't known back in the 1980s, was that if you combine bisantrene with these heart-damaging drugs, that you can protect the heart from the damage caused by these drugs. And this is the side effect that limits their use. Currently, if you are exposed to an anthracycline, you have a lifetime limit. You can only have up to typically 240 milligrams of this drug in your entire life. What can happen is with patients, they'll be responding really well to treatment, and the doctor says, I can't give you any more drug because the damage to the heart is too great. What we find is if you combine our drug with doxorubicin, that you can actually overcome that limitation. We've also had to solve the problem that caused it to be dropped in the first place, this formulation issue that caused it to crystallize out in the blood straight away. So we've gone back in, we've reformulated the drug. It's given us new IP. We've got 20 years life around this, and it allows us to be able to use it widely across all the different cancer indications that we could use this drug in, which is basically all cancer types. So what are we doing now? We're going back into the clinic. We've just completed all the various manufacturing to GMP standards. We've done the preclinical safety. It's considered a new drug now, which is crazy if you think about it. It's a drug from the 1980s. But if you reformulate that drug, as far as the regulator is concerned, it's a completely new drug. It's been designed to be identical inside the body as the old drug, but it means that we had to go through a GLP safety study. So we're about to undertake a phase 1AB study. where we're going to actually go in, look in combination of bisantrene plus doxorubicin to show safety initially, because they've never been combined together in the past, and then do, in the 1B, prove out the cardiovascular protective properties of bisantrene. So we will know at the end of phase 1 whether this drug works. We already know that it works as an anti-cancer drug. It's been approved as a treatment. We're going to prove out whether it can protect the heart. So we're in a really lucky situation where we will know the answer to whether this drug's going to make it all the way through very early on. So that's great because it takes a long time to develop a drug through the market. It's our clinical pipeline. We just announced the phase 2 trial of the old formulation that we did in AML in Israel, just completed this morning. Very successful, met its primary endpoint, exceeded the primary endpoint. We had a 40% response in really difficult to treat cancer patients. And we're about to kick off 2 new trials later in this year. One in all comers. We have a drug that works across all different cancer types, so we can take any patient, doesn't matter what the cancer is. And we're also going to do one more specialised in acute myeloid leukemia, building on the historical data we have. And we also have other programs in development, which I won't talk about. What's the market potential? This is where, if you're an investor, this is what you should be focused on. How much money can you make? With cancer, it's a very diverse disease. There's literally tens of thousands of different cancers out there. And that can make it really difficult to target a particular market. You might be looking at quite small niches with maybe 1,000 patients a year. If you're really lucky, maybe 20,000 patients a year. The market potential of these drugs, because they're so widely used, even as generics, they only get about $100 a dose. For something like doxorubicin's US $1.5 billion in sales. It's probably one of the largest generic drugs out there. So you can imagine we can take our drug. We've done a whole bunch of primary market research to look around pricing, what will insurance companies pay and all the rest of it. And, you know, even with incredibly conservative estimates, we can achieve something around $15,000 US a dose. That's fairly cheap now for a new anti-cancer drug. You can start to think about it. If you're selling $1.5 billion at $100 a dose, and you can turn around and every time that's used, you add your drug at 15,000, you can start to look at what those sort of numbers come through. They're so ridiculously large that if I tell people the truth, they go, oh, it's garbage, can't be true. But this is the reality of what we're actually facing with. So it's about a 3%, $7 billion a year sale, about a 3% penetration rate into the market. We have a whole series of recent and upcoming milestones. We've been delivering on what we say we'll do on time, on budget, moving forward, progressing bisantrene back into the clinic with the new formulation, solving the problems of the past, identifying where this drug is best used, and we will be able to generate and deliver clinical data as we're going along. These trials are all open label, which means they're not sitting around waiting years and years for the result at the end of the trial. You get interim results as it's going along. And we'll leave on this slide. I think I'm pretty close to the end here. Yeah, I don't want to hold you up any longer from your drinks. Thank you very much for sitting through. And if you would like to talk to me more, or Pete Smith, who is actually the person that's on the title slide for giving this talk, will be around to chat further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tillett. It was a fantastic presentation to end the investment potential side of our presentation today. Thank you. If you grab a seat, we've got a panel discussion before we send you out to drink. So before I unleash you out into the back area there, I thought, obviously, conferences like this elicit conversation. You want to have more discussion. Before I let you loose out there to our drinks, I want to introduce you to a very fine panel of human beings who are very knowledgeable in this area. While they're making their way up here, though, I thought also, Jackson at the start of the day talked to you about Marketech. And I'm just going to ask James, would you mind sticking up that QR code for us, please, James? So Chris, would you like to come up and join us? So to put a human face to this amazing bit of tech from Marketech, this is Chris Hill, everyone, if you can make him welcome. Now, Chris, if we perhaps down here, we're not that short, we can pop down here for a second, and then I can let the panel get set up behind us. So I just thought two points were, one, you've got a competition going. So for those of you who haven't registered yet for the competition, you can very quickly use this opportunity to point your cameras at that QR code out there, and you can register for the competition. But I thought, Chris, you could let us in on a few of the secrets maybe of the platform that you've created, and let us know what's behind it. How does it operate?
Thanks, Chrissy. Well, Marketech is the company. Focus is the platform that you can see up there. We've been around for probably 2 or 3 years, but been keeping a pretty low profile until we are comfortable with the platform. And that's the point that we find ourselves at the moment. And we like to think that it's best in breed trading and market information platform. It's bringing together probably the best in terms of market information, and Iris is probably one of our competitors. It's bringing the best bits of Iris in together with the best bits of Trading View, and our charting package has over 40 different indicators. And so we've got a pretty compelling product. We've blended that then also with the vertical events and RAU conferences, so you can stream those live directly through the platform while you're streaming ASX data. And you can also then get access to our fantastic scanning tool, which allows you to identify the buy-sell opportunities that you're looking for in the market according to your own criteria. Yeah, like I say, it's pretty compelling in terms of the function, and then in terms of value, you can get access to our platform and the live data for $20 a month. You can also access it for free to watch the conferences if you can't get there, and you can have live streaming data from $45 a month, and that's blended with a minimum $5 brokerage, but 0.02%. That's got a 0 in front of the 2. It's next to nothing on the brokerage. We don't make anything out of that. It's all out of the platform subscriptions.
So what was frustrating you, Christopher? What was annoying you about these other platforms that you set out to solve?
Look, we thought that there was an opportunity there to create a platform that rivaled the functionality that the professionals have got access to, but for a price that people can afford, and we think we've done that. And so far, the response has been pretty good.
So that is the explanation behind it, team. If you've got that QR code, you've registered. If you haven't, do it while you're listening to the panel discussion. Chris, thanks so much for coming on board and collaborating with us for the first time at TechKnow. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks to Vertical Events.
Cheers, buddy. All right, so I'll be drawing that in a few moments. Brian Leedman, Blink, that's yours one. Who else has we got on our panel today? We've got the wonderful Toby Hicks, who's part of our league. Do you want to do this, David?
Why not?
All right, so you've heard us talk about Chapter 1, who are our media partners. This is the wonderful David who's in charge of that. I'll hand the microphone over and you can do a intro.
Perfect. Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you, everyone, for hanging around. Now, just to let you know, no food or drinks will be served for the next 25 minutes, so you might as well stay in here and listen to the insights from some of the experts. You've listened to a lot of companies present, but here we've got people who are experts in their chosen fields to give you some insights into things from an investment point of view that you may wish to know. Now, on my far end, I have Naveed Hussain, Senior Corporate Advisor at Novus Capital. In the middle is Toby Hicks, who's a partner at Steiner Price Paganin, one of the major law firms who do conduct a lot of work, I should say, for IPOs and corporate work, and know this space exceptionally well, and is also the chair of Digital X, who you probably heard from earlier today. And Brian Leedman, who's the chair of Blink Lab and also a well-known tech entrepreneur in his own right. So now the opportunity here is for you to ask questions. I'll clearly get the ball rolling, but if any of you do have any questions, we will go for sort of 15, 20 minutes and then have an opportunity to have a chat after that. So the first thing I'm most interested in, and we've seen a lot of stories today, and I think most of you here are either tech or biotech investors and have had to ride the wave of the ups and downs of the sector. But first of all, Naveed, from your point of view as someone who invests in the sector, how much or how important is it to hold your nerve? If you find a stock, you like it, you believe it, and you're seeing the share price go up, the share price go down, how important is it to hold the nerve?
It's very critical. The main reason is that you should decide when you invest in the stock, what's the reason you're investing in that one. And if they're delivering on that reason, then you just stick to that. Because the market is all about emotions, fear and greed. So when the fear comes in or the profit taking happens, then it's better to hold the stock. If the fundamentals change, then you should decide, like you should think about it. Or if the price has gone up beyond the valuation, then you think of selling the stock. Otherwise, you hold the stock for a long term. And some of the small caps, because Australia has got such a depth of industries, and there is a good prospect many companies will become medium cap companies, and so it's a good to hold at the early stages and hold the stock.
And maybe, Brian, if I can ask you the same question, as an investor, but also a board member who sat on a number of listed company boards, when there's a lot of noise outside saying change tack, do something different, how important is it from a board point of view to hold the line and know exactly what the direction is the company's going and what the path is you want to achieve?
Well, I'm actually a very firm believer in free market economy. And when I look at investors, I think this is a free market economy. In other words, you guys can invest in any company you like, but you want the company that you invest in to be focused on, say, one thing. And companies that really diversify their investments, what they're really doing is spreading their risk. Whereas I think that the right of every investor here is for you to spread your risk. So from my perspective, in answering to your question, I like companies that are focused on achieving something. That's what we raise the money for. That's why we exist. If we say, based on our milestones, we're going to achieve this, then that's what we're focused on. Now, if we can't and we don't, then you should certainly be looking at, to your point, in terms of you should change and get out. And if that company goes bust, so be it. You don't want to go bust because you've diversified yourself. But if the company has got a track record and the right people are behind it and they're focused on achieving something and there's a dream, and that's the goal, and you've invested in that to achieve that goal. And hopefully that company will do that. And that's really that's what we raise the money for. That's what we're focused on. That's what I'm focused on in my companies, to achieve an end result. Sometimes there's up and downs along the journey, and it's up to you whether you believe in whether the company is still going to achieve it or not. But that's what we're focused on. And for you guys, you can diversify as much as you like, but the companies, they should be focused on achieving that goal. And if they do really focus on it, I think there's a very good chance that they can get there.
Toby, putting your other hat on, so obviously a partner at Steiner Price Paganin, but chair of DigitalX, who just recently launched the first ever blockchain ETF here in Australia, which is a significant milestone that I'm not sure even the market understood how significant that milestone was. Many years in the making. Were there times that you sort of threw your hands in the air and thought, are we sure we should be doing this? Or was there always a steadfast focus from the board that this is the path, we can see the values, so we're all in?
Yeah, I mean, I think DigitalX is a good example of being in an industry very different to lots of the other companies here today, that the industry's been developing and evolving around DigitalX as DigitalX has been evolving. So there are various pathways we could have taken at various points. Some of them would have led us to be delisted. Some of them would have led us to probably be broke or be bankrupt now. But ultimately, we as a company had to decide we were a believer in the space, digital assets, blockchain technologies, Bitcoin in particular. But we've had to wait for the industry to evolve so that we could work out what the best pathway for us was. And the Bitcoin ETF is a substantive step forward for digital assets and for Bitcoin as an asset, because it legitimizes something that we've argued for a long time is legitimate, but which the broader community felt had a skepticism around it. So it is a massive step forward. To Brian's point, I agree with him 100%. you need to be investing into companies that are quite clear as to what they are trying to achieve. And if they cease going in that direction, then I think you have to question your investment. And Digital X is a company in that regard that we knew what we believed in, and we were waiting for that belief and still waiting for that belief to catch up with the industry.
Hold the mic, because I've just got another question in relation to the IPO market. So it's been a really, really soft, as we know, IPO market, particularly at the smaller end of the small to mid-cap end of the market. Not many have got through. Obviously, Blink Lab was one, which has done exceptionally well. Toby, you're at the pointy end of the IPO world. You see what gets up, what doesn't, what's attracting interest. Are there any themes, or are there anything you're seeing from a legal point of view that is actually giving you some ideas of, well, this is where I think what the IPO market's going to look like over the next 6 to 12 months, and the type of themes that investors should be focusing on? And probably the other part of that is, are there things that maybe did get up that won't get up in the future? And is it a different type of company that will be coming to the IPO market?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because for everybody here who's interested in investing into tech and biotech companies, what you should know is that one of the reasons there hasn't been as many IPOs of new companies in the last few years is that the ASX changed the criteria for companies looking to list on the ASX from a technology or biotechnology standpoint. So what that meant was that they basically upped the criteria that companies needed to satisfy before the ASX would list them, which made it very difficult for some companies that had previously seen the ASX as a growth phase for capital investment to get access to that capital through the IPO, because ASX was saying no to those companies before they even listed their prospectus. So that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen as much growth in technology stocks coming onto the ASX. Blink Lab is clearly one that met the criteria of the ASX and has successfully listed and commenced its life, and there have been only a few others. But what it is going to mean is that going forward, ASX is expecting tech companies that come to list to have a higher revenue level before they even list. And for biotech companies, it means that they're going to expect that they have further advanced their trials and their IP before they're able to put out a prospectus and list.
Can I just add to that? Because there's something that happened, Toby, that you wouldn't be aware of, a major development about 2 weeks ago. Because we had this big BioShares conference in Fremantle, and I was part of the reason why they brought the event over there. And what you're referring to was interesting, because at the previous BioShares conference in Hobart last year, an ASX representative got up there and said that if you're going to be in biotech, you have to list on the ASX, you need to be in a phase 2 clinical trial. So for those that know what a phase 2 is, pretty advanced. You're already past a phase 1, you've already treated many humans and already after your animal trials. That caused a massive uproar. It was like, holy crap, how on earth are we going to get a company listed if you have to be in a phase 2? Do you know how much money it costs to get to a phase 2? How are you going to raise that money? And so there was a big furor about that. So 2 weeks ago in Fremantle, at the next BioShares conference, the head of ASX in Western Australia got up and clarified it. And he said very clearly that now you just need to have a direct pathway to a clinical study. So you don't have to be in a clinical study now, but you have to be in a direct pathway. This is a very recent development. I certainly welcome it, because these biotechs, they need to raise money from investors like yourself. If you believe in the company and the dream that they have, and you're prepared to invest your money in it, who's the ASX to say that you shouldn't be able to raise money if you can raise it? And so I think that's a change of attitude. I really welcome that. Blink Lab, yes, got up before any of these changes have happened. But my previous company, ResApp Health, which went on to tremendous success, that company was pre-clinical when it listed, right? As early stage as you possibly could get. And with that money, the generous support from our shareholders, we were able to turn that into a $200 million company, and from a $7 million market cap to start. So there has been a shift. I welcome it. And I think you're going to see more biotech companies float on the back of this recent change in ASX attitude towards biotech.
Naveed, just to that point, they're going to be more advanced though, aren't they? The companies coming to the ASX will be more advanced. Is that a good thing?
Certainly. It's a good thing because it will give investors more confidence that the companies are more on a good sound footing as well. And the market is changing as well. So, and the prospectus is pretty in depth when the company do an IPO. So the ASX is pretty rigorous in looking at the prospectus, and there's always supplementary prospectus comes up as well. So the compliance regime is pretty strong here to protect the investors.
Again, you're at the pointy end where you're seeing companies coming to you, whether they're pre-IPO or IPO and pitching. Are you seeing a different type of company coming to you that you would have seen 2 or 3 years ago from a tech biotech point of view?
Yes, certainly the dynamics have changed. 3 years back after COVID, there was so much money in the market, like the raising was pretty, there was plenty of liquidity in the market. But that changed once the Reserve Bank started announcing to the market or showing to the market that the interest rate will start going up. And when the interest rates start going up, the liquidity dries up. The last 2 years has been extremely difficult for the companies to raise capital. So now we can see the more quality companies that have survived the last 2 years. They have been resilient, and that's a good thing because those companies will do well eventually. And so the pre-IPO raising has been happening now, and I believe that in the next year you will see after the Christmas, probably next February, March, you will see a lot of companies coming onto the market. So the liquidity is back, so market is expecting the America to drop interest rate in September. If that happens, that's positive to the market. So certainly there's a lot of interest right now, both on the investor side as well as there's interest on the investment side as well to look at good, strong companies.
And Brian, during a time when it is hard to raise capital, and a lot of the shareholders would have seen, companies raising or finding it difficult to raise capital, how creative do companies have to be? Either looking at sources outside of the traditional sources, whether they be in jurisdictions outside of Australia, or even using, other tools or other mechanisms to raise equity or reduce dilution as much as possible, just to keep the company moving forward in its projection.
You mean from a listed company perspective? Well, the best way to raise money in a listed company is through a straight-out placement. Simple, issue shares for a certain price, and that's always been my go-to. You then have more inventive ways to raise money. You get into the world of convertible notes and share purchase plans and things like that. They all have their downsides compared to a straight-out placement. Then, they do get into raisings of last resort. They typically are convertible notes. They've got a whole book of caveats that come with them, and they can really sink a company if you don't meet your ends. I'm going to take a bit of a Trumpian response. I don't know if you remember that debate that he had with Biden, and he was asked about what would you do about Ukraine in terms of Russia? And he never answered the question. If you were president, what would you do? And he said, well, what he said was, if I was president, it never would have happened, right? And so my attitude is, it's like, what are you going to do? You're going to kick the Russians out? I don't think so. They're already there. The mistakes happened. And so my attitude with companies and raising money is you've got to do it right. You've got to have a company that does achieve its goals, that is achieving its milestones. And if you do that and you do it right, you're not going to have a problem raising money because you will always have a captive audience amongst your investors to raise money. I've never had to go down the convertible note route. I've never had to be creative with all these various offerings that have been given to me over the years. I'm not interested. I don't want to be interested. I want to make sure that the company stays focused on doing what it does. And if you do that, and I have this one big rule, do what you say you're going to do in the time frame you say you're going to do it in. If you would do that, and by the way, it's not that easy, right? Companies miss their milestones and they get punished. And you know what? They should be punished. That's what will happen to you if you don't do what you say you're going to do. But stay focused, make sure you got the right leadership team in the company, do what you say you're going to do, and you will not have that problem. And I don't know if that really answered your question, because I just don't want to go down that path. I'm going to do a Trump on that. I'm not answering it.
Okay, on that note, Toby, you've, as I said, at the pointy end of a legal assistant to listed companies. You've probably seen it all. During that time, as Naveen mentioned, when there wasn't a lot of cash around, there wasn't a lot of liquidity, companies had to survive and get themselves to a point they are now where they're starting to see the fruits of their labour. How creative do companies need to be?
Very creative is the answer to the question, and I think Brian summarised it very well. The easiest, I think, as an investor, you can interpret what's going on by reading into the announcements. A company that can do a placement easily, quickly, no free attaching options, just shares, that tells you that there is appetite for that company's shares. Companies that add in a rights issue to existing shareholders often do that to ensure that shareholders feel like they can invest, but they're expecting the majority of funds to come from sophisticated investors in a placement. Similar with a share purchase plan. Once you start getting to shares with free attaching options, you can start to interpret that the brokers are telling them the company that they're raising might be a little bit more difficult. And then if you see convertible notes or director loans, you can assume that that raising has been impossible, and so the company's had to get money from wherever it can. I think that probably sums up the hierarchy of capital raising.
Okay, we've got time for one more question, which I will throw to Naveed first. Looking forward, we've got a room full of investors who've invested their hard-earned into tech or biotech stocks, and this is why they're here to listen to these stories, or they're here to pick up some ideas of things they might want to invest in. What does the next 6-12 months look like? And what not advice, but what would you be telling this group they should be focusing on over the next 6 to 12 months from a tech biotech point of view?
Just go back to the history, see how the company performed in the last 2 years. Have they achieved? The quality of management is extremely important. And the second thing is that how much skin they have in the game, how much money they have invested in the game. And the third thing is that see the quality of the asset, the IP, and see if they can, the revenue they're going to earn in the future, what's the quality of revenue? Are they scalable business? Scalability is really important. Recurring revenue is another thing, that is they're getting the revenue over a period of time, and see how the management communicate to the investors, what vision they have. Are they giving some guidance to the market? If they give guidance to the market, to the investors, then you feel they're confident in their goals. So these are the things I look at. Management is key. The IP, the quality of revenue they're going to earn in the future is key. Is it going to be from one source or it's going to be across the board? Like this revenue spread around through a wide range of customers, or through one or two big clients. So these are the things you should at least look at. Especially the history of the company is extremely important. How they deliver in the past, and how much skin they have got in the game as well.
Thank you, everybody. We are now at drinks and food time. I know we've got one more from Chrissy coming through, but can we just put our hands together for Naveed, Toby and Brian? Some great insights, and clearly we'll be free to have a chat over a beer or a wine or a soft drink after Chrissy has finished.
Hold team if you can for 2 seconds. Chris would like to come up and do the draw for the prize for Marketech. Okay, so we're still going on Dave's thing, which is no food, alcohol, drink, nothing until this is drawn. Okay, so Chris.
Thanks, Chrissy. We've already done the draw, and hopefully he's still here. Otherwise, we can arrange to get it to him in the post. Oh, okay, all right. Richard Morris, are you here? Hey, excellent. Got a pair of Open Run Pro headphones, bone conducting headphones, latest technology for you. Excellent. And don't forget, folks, the platform, the whole conference can be accessed after the conference on a on-demand basis. So if there's any of the slides that you've missed or what have you, access it through the Focus platform. Thanks.
Cheers. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for attending today. And make sure as well you scan our QR code at the back of our conference program and find out when our next conference is. We're back here in Sydney for New World Metals in September. Looking forward to seeing you all then. Thank you, everyone.